Welcome and thank you all for coming to this in-person event. It's so wonderful to see all of you, even with masks. I'm John Jilin, Associate Professor of Urban Design at the Weitzman School of Design and co-curator of Building in China exhibition. I just want to remind you that this lecture is the first of the two-part event tonight and will be followed by the opening ceremony of the exhibition in the main reading room on the first floor of this building at 7:30 p.m. The curators, architects, including the speaker tonight, will share the experience working on this project featuring an extremely important chapter of cultural exchange. So please stay with us. Now I shall turn it over to Dean Steiner to open the event and introduce the speaker tonight.
Building in China is a historic happening on so many levels. It's hard to know where to begin. So we're living in a time of political polarization and tribalism that has driven people, I fear, too far apart, not just here in the United States, but in other parts of the world. And we need to do all we can to build and nurture our relationships across political, cultural, and religious borders. We may be separated by borders, and borders certainly have a role to play in the global economy. But we can't allow borders to define us or people on who feel differently than we. Borders certainly didn't hold back the first generation of Chinese modern architecture students here at Penn. Liang Qichen and Lin Heilin, Yang Tingbo, Tan Jin, and the many others who followed in their footsteps. And I don't mean just geographically or politically. They had to cross an ocean, and many of you who study at Penn have had to cross oceans. I only had to cross, I'm from Ohio, so when I came to study at Penn, I only had to cross the Appalachian Mountains. So, we can cross it like me in a car, or many of you in airplanes. But in the days when that first generation came, of course, they came by ship, and it took, they had to cross oceans quite literally to study at Penn. They left behind family and opportunity. So what we see in the Building in China exhibit is crossing borders is something they excelled at. They would be border crossers throughout their lives, and that play a part in crossing borders successfully, and all those skills that we need to continue to cultivate in our students. And it's the skills that make great architects, that make great landscape architects, that make great planners. And artists and designers traditionally are gifted in these ways, and we need to support and encourage curiosity and risk-taking. Building in China also reminds us of another value central to the health of the arts and creative professions like architecture, design, preservation, and planning, and that's collaboration. Borders haven't held back contemporary Chinese, especially designers like tonight's speaker, Yung Ho Chang or Shi Wang, whose firms we get to know in the contemporary part of the Building in China exhibit. Educated in both China and the United States, Yung Ho Chang received his Master of Architecture degree from the University of California, Berkeley. Go Bears, in 1985. He's been practicing in China since 1992, established Atelier FCJZ with Lei Lu in 1993. He has won a number of prizes, such as the first prize in residential design competition, a progressive architecture citation, a UNESCO prize, and on and on and on. A very been recognized widely for his contributions to architecture. Chang's work is the subject of a number of books and monographs, including exhibition as Construction Experiment, which is in English. It's published by the Images Publishing Group. The World Architecture Special, the modernity of making, Yung Ho Chang in Chinese and English, Yung Ho Chang, Atelier Feichang Jianzhu, a Chinese practice in English and French, and Yung Ho Chang, Luz Chiara Camera Oscura in Italiano. He has participated in international exhibitions in art and architecture, including 6 times at the Venice Biennale. Chang has taught at various architecture schools in the United States and China. He was the professor and founding head of the Graduate Center of Architecture at Peking University from 1999 to 2005. He held the Kenzo Tange Chair in Architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design in 2002, the Errol Saarinen Chair in Michigan in 2004, and between 2005 and 2010, he headed the architecture department at MIT. He was also a Pritzker Prize jury member from 2012 to 2017. So it's a great pleasure to welcome to Penn, to welcome to Philadelphia, the wonderful Yung Ho Chang. Welcome.
Thank you, Dean Steiner, for a very generous introduction. Well, I was working on my PowerPoint for this talk. So I thought about including some images of my father's work, who was also an architect. However, I had some hesitation because 19 years ago, I was here participating in a symposium on Beaux-Arts and the Chinese architecture. I showed some of my father's work. And then I was thinking, after 1/5 of a century, imagine someone come back to participate in this event, and she or he would see the same architect still slow cooking his father. So it may not sound like a great idea, but however, be slightly more serious. However, to fully comprehend the significance of the inheritance handed down by the older generations of architects, and then somehow embrace that with our own practice today is a very time-consuming process, maybe even a lifelong pursuit. So I decided to show you 2 images of my father's work after all. So as far as inheritance is concerned, I have broken down into several subjects. The first one is form. When I learned about the development of form in architecture, somehow it's always classicism versus modernism. And then today, of course, I don't think that kind of a simplified understanding of the architectural history is correct, but rather what happens is more how from classicism to modernism, it's a process of revolution as well as evolution. So that here at the great University of Pennsylvania, we have witnessed at least one architect who, of course, is Lu Kang, and married the 2 isms together seamlessly, produced a timeless architecture. So I don't need to dwell on that for too long. However, I just started to show what's I just mentioned earlier. So this is the third year work of my father as today Southeast University. At that time, it's called National Central University. It's a celebrities a memorial. I think the title is politically incorrect. However, what you see is the easily the classical language and on full display, harmony, balance, and then you see central axis, you see symmetry and etc. However, what's also interesting is that you can see the inspiration for this building is not from necessarily ancient Greek, but something quite contemporary. I think that work is done in the 1930s. And my dad was probably most likely looking at a building completed here in the United States in the 1920s. It's a Lincoln Memorial. This is the mini Lincoln Memorial. And I wonder if he already developed a sensibility for simpler geometry, maybe, and maybe even less, but a bit of abstraction. The reason I would say that because in his second year, and the instructor would introduce the students not only a building, but also an urban context to the building. The building in stylistic term would be Art Deco, more or less. But what's important is that the urban issues already are there. One of them, as you can see, is urban density. And the best part of it is, let's see, is here. So we see two things. The process of a big metropolis in the making, and then that seems to be a steel structure building under construction. So somehow this desire for a young student of architecture in the 1930s in Nanjing seemed to have something, of course, to do with the classicism imported from UPenn, because Yang Qingbao and Tong Jin, they were all professors here. But also there's a sense to be part of the developing time they were experienced. So that's why I suspect, after all, so that a little memorial it's just a simple design imitating an older style, but there's a way to probably to understand that style even more so with what's happening around them. And then I'd like to show my own early effort. This is in 1980s. So I thought, actually a friend came to ask me if I could design a house for his aunt. And so I think it's in Florida, I've never been there, but just from his description sounds like a very kind of idyllic setting. So anyway, I used the classical representation as a vehicle to locate the building into this imaginary idyllic setting for one thing, but also as a bridge connecting the tradition and modernity. It's just an experiment. I don't want to talk too much about it, but also I realized the presentation method doesn't belong to a particular style of architecture, but rather it's a tool. It can be used to work on a different type of architecture because it has to do with how to portray light, for instance, in a very realistic manner. So the next project doesn't look probably traditional in any way, but since the project had to do with light, I did watercolor rendering again. So here, what you see is a section of a building where the roof and also floors are made of glass. And then on the on your left hand is about the daylight coming down into the building, and then on your right side is the artificial light going out in the evening, and then the elevation in the middle is half day and half night. I think that's kind of obvious. And then the plans. Not only here, I think I was already aware of Kang's influence, but also I discovered another great American architect, Yung Ho Chang. So instead of a 9-grade problem, so I kind of created a 4-grade problem for myself. What it is, of course, it's not really a problem, but a space structure has to come in early enough to organize a piece of architecture. That's something I believe until this day, so that space can't be an afterthought. You know, you have to organize it from very beginning. So these are the 4 floors, 4-floor plans from the basement, from the left, and there's a heater. I didn't know how to draw it. I went to the Ace Hardware in Berkeley. I was teaching at Berkeley and get a little book and figure it out, and the plumbing and so on. And then the street level floor plan, so you can see there's spas, there's a toilet, and then go upstairs, there's some furniture, and then eventually the top floor is a spiritual space. So, and then there's other drawings. So however, these kind of a spatial organization, be it 9-grade or 4-grade, in fact, if you look at them, they are very harmonious because it's totally symmetrical. And of course, with axis. So is this modern or classical? And probably that question is already irrelevant. It is an architecture probably would have somehow combine all these different spatial structural devices to make a very holistic piece. And then that's the built reality and in Shanghai. And after like 23 years. So you go in, this on the top level. Someone's meditating, I suppose. But anyway, the idea, of course, from drawing, it may look abstract to some extent, but the drawings and also the design, of course, were all about creating a very real, tangible experience for people. And then 1 floor down. And then here you see 2 floors with the transparency of the floors. So anyway, here is a house that is not one you would see probably on the real estate market yet. I'm still hopeful. But the point is that that way of working with a piece of architecture, using the design devices inherited from both classicist and modernist architectural precedents seems to be a way I would like to pursue further. So, and then later on, I drew another house. So this time I had I got really into a glass house, Farnsworth's house, of course, and Philip Johnson's own house and so on. What I discovered is something you all know very well. So glass house has to be a one-room structure because the transparency of it would require the house has no partitions. Otherwise, you would see not through the building. And then my question was that, could we have two things actually? One is that is a glass house is as transparent as Farnsworth, but at the same time, it has rooms. So there are partitions to divide these houses. That sounds like a contradictory thing, but you'll see in a minute. The second question is an older one, is that when I work on a vertical glass house, one of the main things is to provide privacy to the glass house. So in the city, if you have a regular glass house, you can't have a neighbor because you would see everything in the other house. However, here, again, I'm trying to have a glass house, yet privacy, not have the vertical transparency. So what I did is to have a glass wall in the middle so that there are rooms and then you can still see through. And then I have a courtyard around the house and then make a more introverted glass house so that you have privacy. And then I did these drawings. There again, you see probably the not very abstract, probably more realistic, i.e. The classical approach of representation. And yet I was doing already here axonometrics, which is modern again. So the modern and the classical, they are combined in different ways for different projects. And this is the final floor plan. At that time, I already noticed one thing, is a relationship between the glass box and the structural system. So if you see my gesture, because Mies put the structure outside the block, the glass box. And then Johnson put the structure, steel structure, in the same plane as the curtain wall, the windows. So I thought maybe I could try one thing is to have the structure to be set back, and then there won't be any structure on the periphery of the house. And here it is. And there are 4 walls supporting the entire house. So this is the built version of it, which has 4 studies and studios on the ground level. So as you can see, and then with the glass partitions right above in the middle, forming a courtyard. There are a lot of cruise forms in the presentation today. However, I just have to make a disclaimer. It's nothing religious. It's just it's more mellowish than anything else. And then so you look up. And on the upper level, so the 4 spaces are of the same size, which for me is very important. I started have the cruise form kind of shifted to the side, and then I brought it back on on the center becomes very axial. So one, go back. So you enter from here, and this is the dining room and kitchen, and the living area, and the bathroom and a bedroom. Privacy inside of the house was solved later on with, because the interior is not done yet, just having a curtain around the bed and a curtain around the bath and toilet. Hopefully I'll come back when the interior is done. So anyway, so here and you see more of the missing influence, I suppose. The water is not on the final level, but basically you see a enclosure, which when you walk around, it gives you a panoramic experience. What I wanted to say, because I decided to cut out all these reference images, I was inspired by Mies, but I was also very much inspired by Palladio. The idea came from as much as fun source, actually more from Villa Rotonda. So you go in the Villa Rotonda, it's a filmic experience. You go around, it's on top of a little hill, so you have different views. And of course, you make a full circle, you come back to where you started. So that's a house like that in my mind. Although maybe there's something more Eastern, so you don't open to the full view because they are neighbors anyway, but you got these little cuts. You get a glimpse of a different view each time when you turn the corner. So inside you see the loading wall, the only structure in there. So you can see the open corner, which is very important for me. So anyway, that's one of the classical and modern houses. And there's another one, another cross, but this time actually it's two sections. That's how it's built. This is about the people who live here on the left-hand side, but go to work in the study on the other side. So, and then only when they go from the living quarters to the working quarters, they would cross the courtyard. And also there's a body of water. Later on, the Portuguese architect Álvaro Siza designed this beautiful art museum. It became the view of our house. That's the curvilinear thing. So which is just fine. But the whole idea is that when you cross the courtyard, of course, you may see if there are trees and the sky and other architecture. Again, the interior is not done. I could not show them to you right now. So this is the living quarters side of the house. So the split house is another house we did later on. Was actually based on this design. This is a design in the early 1990s. It's about the same time as the vertical glass house. So this is a group of houses together in the city of Ningbo. In my mind, we kind of imagine it as the little Acropolis, like in essence, because it's on also a small hill. So here are altogether 4 houses. You saw 2, and there is a third one and a fourth one. I'll show you quickly. One is this one. Probably you are curious about what that is. It's a beam. So the beam is the materialization of the axis. So the axis no longer an abstract line, doesn't really exist formally, and here is it's a concrete thing. And then on top of the beam, the artist could walk and then checking out her or his paintings or sculptures in this double height space. So it's a beam that realizes the idea of axis, and then it's a beam actually allow people to occupy it. So and then I hope that the artists who will be working here would enjoy living with a beam. It doesn't sound terribly exciting, but I think there's something to be explored. So this is an early photo, show you, that's the only photo I have. So there's a staircase in the back there. So you come up, and then this beam would take you to your study, and then that one is over the studio. And this one is about living with a room, the roof. And this is the only one, it's not a symmetrical, it's more like a section being extruded. And then the roof unites the studio and also the living quarters. And of course, at the same time, it separates the two spaces to some extent. So this is a living quarter, yet all the furniture and utility and the equipment and so on will have to be installed after Chinese New Year. It will start. So this is the idea of a acropolis. So there are other buildings. It's within a community, almost as it's very center. And anyway, so it's that little village I just described. So here, I'd like to sum up what I have been talking about. So for me, it's very important to understand the development of architecture throughout the history in both the East and the West, not as kind of a chopped off period, but something continuous. And then today, so we are looking back and we are looking forward, and we are at our very own moments all at the same time. That's how we should look at all this architecture, the original architects produce, and what we can take and go further. The next issue is space. Space is an issue we all know is important for architecture. However, for China, I think it's very important to understand China is part of the subtropical zone of Asia, meaning the climatic conditions would offer some opportunities to architecture in terms of space, especially in terms of how the outdoor and indoor are negotiated. So this is a Coil house in Beijing. I grew up in one of these houses. What's interesting here is that you see this man, it could be me. It's not living in the rooms, but treating the courtyard as an empty light well. But he's very much living in the courtyard. So there's a table with teacup, with cigarettes, of course, bird cages, and the floors. And he added something, added little, maybe it's a little canopy of some sort. So that's a particular lifestyle would work in the subtropical Asia. And then, so the space would be quite differently. So of course, this particular space is called a courtyard, and this is a traditional house. And then the space is used for, of course, circulation, but it itself is space. You know, when I was a child, we always would occupy. We would play, and the family would have a meal in there, and hosting guests and so on. And this is not a really old traditional house in Beijing, but nonetheless it has the basic traditional layout. We were asked to turn it into a vegetarian restaurant. And then there are two existing courtyards. We kept one, the one you see. And then the other one, we put a glass roof. The reason is glass. We like the light is one thing, but more importantly, we like to have the restaurant goers to feel like they're still in the courtyard. So, and then this room would open to a real open courtyard. And then you can see also we started to play with traditional material and the craft. By the way, I don't think I have a lot of time to discuss the material or even the structure and some of the craft involved. But I just mentioned a few. If you have a question later on for a particular way of putting something together, I would be happy to answer. So here you see is wood brick, but rather wood trying to do brick. So it's not, again, Mr. Kang, you know, brick wants to be brick. Here is wood wants to be brick. And tiles wants to be a screen wall, and so on. And then the outside traditional roof form, we simply brought it in, so you see it, the curvilinear roof. And then we didn't really, we weren't involved in the construction, but to a very minimum extent, I actually personally contributed to putting some cartoons on the wall. So here you see, if there are any literature lovers may recognize the face of the elderly man. That's the self-portrait of James Joyce. And that girl, that's my niece. So anyway, another courtyard house, and I always wondered, is a traditional courtyard house really taking advantage of the courtyard? It's sort of a rhetorical question. Actually, I didn't treat it rhetorically. I thought, what if a family would live around the clock? That would probably take full advantage in one way of a central courtyard. So in the morning, you can see, you would stay on the west wing, and then in the afternoon would be east wing, and at noon time you're on the north side. In the evening, and you're on the south side, and then this is a very small house. When we had the idea, we were able to maximize the size of the courtyard. So you can see the spaces around it are very shallow. But meanwhile, there's some things from actually rather minor difference from the traditional courtyard, but a new understanding emerged eventually is the living space is of a donut shape. So that's the living room, not 4 rooms. as you saw early on. And then from the outside, you don't see much. And now, of course, here you see in the courtyard. And then in this tiny courtyard, you can see the same facade, of course, with a wrapped around. Again, this is one of the buildings I love to draw and develop surface drawing, which is open up the entire courtyard elevation. And then you'll see some details. Here is steel structure and working with wood. You can see a bit. So the gray is the steel, and of course wood is of the wood color. And then you can see when you enter the house, this is the east wing, and the northern wing is where the furniture are. And then you come around. This is from the northwest corner, looking at the house. What in the west wing actually is a kitchen. So it's where you cook and eat. And then this is also one of the turning points of the house. The detail shows you high beams and traditional tiles. They can coexist. This is for us becomes almost like a thesis of our work. And then using the same idea of a courtyard, but making something much bigger, way beyond just being residential. This is a culture and art center for a fashion corporation. And they have many, quite a few brands for women's clothes. And it's in Zhejiang, in the city of Jiaxing. What's interesting is something you don't see anymore is in these three wings, they were existing, finished, completed foundations and basement. So the client asked us if we could work with them. So I figure a lot of resources already put in there, we better use them. It makes sense to use them. So all we added is these wings. So we just took the existing foundation and made an entirely new design out of it. And then, of course, so as a courtyard building, the central courtyard becomes the organizing element of the entire building. And that's how you enter it. And here is the reception and the tea house. And on the other side is art museum. This company, they actually has quite a extensive art collection. So you go in, you are looking at now the art museum, art gallery, and the tea house on this side, and it's a fashion showroom as the west wing, and then office building. So and then underneath the courtyard is actually where trading happens. Is the trading hall, and then of course the courtyard with a sink and brings the landscape down. It becomes a more multi-level kind of spatial organization for the courtyard. And here you see the trading hall and the ground floor garden above. And then you see again on the some of the materials, we use concrete a lot. Not that we don't want to use other materials. I never had a chance to ask Endo-san if he used wood and others. But every time when we have a new project, we would struggle and tell ourselves, let's stop using concrete. But too often so far we came back to concrete. So, but I wanted to tell you, it's really a real anxiety on our part, but I think that anxiety is probably healthy. So you'll see a bit of what we are trying beyond concrete. Although now we can do a very nice concrete surface with different formworks. And this is in the art gallery among window. This the kid is one of our colleagues' daughter. Anyway, courtyard as a way to open up the architecture, organizing the entire building is something we have been trying doing, of course, in China, and in this case, in Paris. When we won the competition to design the China House for the International University City in Paris, we already knew something we didn't know before. Among all these Western European countries, Paris has the mildest weather. The lowest temperature of the winter is 5 degrees centigrade above zero. So it's very comfortable. So we took that as a crew and developed, this is the China House. That's one we know the best. It's the Swiss House by Le Corbusier. So we also, Corbu had to do with maybe no more than 50 rooms. We had 300 rooms to put together. So we started to imagine the Le Corbusier proposition is a bar building with a corridor and rooms. Now, since we have so many rooms, we have a much longer bar and then banded. And then that's what we got. And now, of course, 8 stories instead of 3 or 4 stories for Corbu. And then so there's a central garden, and you see the staircases would take the students up to the roof and enjoying the garden on the way. And then on the outside is all brick. And there's a roof garden. It was actually required by the Grand Paris idea developed in the 1910s. I'm sorry, 2010s. So, and that's it's already topped off. I have some kind of older images here, and then you see the courtyard. So the circulation is around the courtyard. All the rooms would have views on the outside. And courtyard is one of the subtropical spaces we have been interested in. Another one is the under eave space. So you have a building, you have overhang around it. And then the initial idea, as we all know, is for the overhang to protect the rain onto the wall. Often the wall is plaster and some material is a little more on the fragile side. So we thought it's not a form of it, but rather it is this particular way to create an in-between space. In-between meaning between the nature and the artificial, and then allow people to be in touch with both. So this is an earlier project. It's a little museum, so you can see a big cantilever. And this is also a bridge building, so there's outdoor or semi-outdoor spaces also under the belly of the museum. And then you saw that project already, and there's of course a big cantilever creates a space for people to move around the courtyard, making the courtyard and the indoor spaces more integrated through this transitional zone. And this is a project I will show a little more. It's the renovation of some That's about 100 years old structure. But we in this case, we extended the depth of the under eave space so that people can actually use it, can sit here having a coffee or something. So anyway, so that space for me is somehow not being paid enough attention for you know, by architects for the contemporary conditions. And then we tried a few things. Here is to use these cantilevered eaves, not only for the eaves, but for the entire building. And then you can see towards the center of the building, the structure depth is much greater. That's where all the dock workers the dock works are. And then of course it becomes tapered out towards the periphery. And so that's the complete project. It's again a visitor center for a hard liquor brand in a very remote part of Sichuan. So you see that's the thickness of the structure right in the center of the building, and then it would again taper out as such, and then no columns except these four pillars in the middle. So it's a very open structure. So from the outside, you only see really the thin edge of the eaves. The program also is rather untypical, put it that way. So when we listen, of course, to the client first and so on, we realize it's very important for the visitors not to only understand the process of making the liquor, but also to understand the geographical condition of the whole area. So we put all the guest rooms, like a hotel, on top of the roof. So this is our guest rooms. And then there's exhibition space. There's actually a theater and restaurant, and there's an R&D center and so on, all down below. So this is the entrance to the hotel. And then here you'll see this is actually the R&D center. And then you see the cantilever becomes a device to express this particular climatic region, but also formally probably speaks a kind of a vernacular language, which also is about where this building is. And this is on the rooftop and how people would enter the hotel rooms. And then from the earlier projects, we came with an idea is to really understand how these different layers of space would all work together. So you can see right in the middle is a courtyard, so it's outdoor. And then the dark space is the air-conditioned spaces. So of course, in many places, and including parts of China, and you have to have the air conditioners. And then, however, on the outside, there's one layer of space that are totally functional, but yet because the cantilever eaves is so deep that so they are well protected, and then the big eaves. So essentially, it's like an umbrella. It's an umbrella space with a hollow core, so you can see the section of it. And then this is one building, and then what we had for the project, which is International Exchange Center for the Medical University of Wenzhou. Wenzhou means mild city because the climate is very agreeable. So what you see here is these buildings actually are, or rather their eaves are very close to each other. There's only 50 centimeter wide slit there to separate the two buildings. So in drawing would look like this. And then sunlight would come down as well as rain. So the people, students and faculty alike, they would be close always to the nature by living in this, working, studying in this big outdoor space. And this is the construction site. Unfortunately, the slit I was talking about is covered by board during construction. And then imagine all the 8 buildings they're connected like this, or rather they're connected but yet are separate buildings, so that it's like a little forest or a grove of trees, and would cover up an area on the campus of this university to create a microclimate as the ultimate goal. And then it's also, I don't have more updated photos to show you, and but it is well under the way by now. So the idea, again, is about the climate and the space. But it's very important, I want to say, it's about the way we live. We like air conditioners. I like my heater and all these, but I also would like to have the option, just like everyone else, to be out there to breathe fresh air and experience something a little different. So that's that. So the client wouldn't often be able to tell you that. But when you present them, they may, of course, may not like it, but you have to let the client know. As architects, we care about the quality of your life, maybe more than you do yourself. So tectonics, Tumu in Chinese means earth wood. That's the way we describe construction, we describe architecture. However, for a long time, we only hear the kind of a timber and mostly timber. I don't know where earth went sometimes. Timber structure of the grand palaces or big temples. And we hardly pay any attention to the way the common folks would live. And then there were some architects started to really, especially in the south side of Yangtze River, they started to do a very systematic investigation of the vernacular everyday. To what extent is rather generic, but the common architecture people would occupy. And then one of my teachers, more than one actually, this particular one drew lots of these surveys, a lot of these houses, and put together books. One of them I strongly recommend with all the Chinese students here. It's called the Zhejiang Vernacular Houses, Zhejiang Minju. The author's name may not appear on the cover of the book because it's a research institute. It's this man's name, Fu Xinian, is the name we all should remember. So anyway, here is a more stylistically present image, but you can see the different texture and the dimensions of the timber structure. It's very light and has a very, very delightful quality we don't see in the big monuments. And then we had an opportunity to really explore and interpret such kind of a vernacular or more the everyday kind of a timber structure. These rural buildings are in the hill town, hill city of Chongqing. It's very hard to even give them a name. It's not it's a kind of a typical Chinese, as we know, but it's not also not really Western. But it's probably the most basic construction of its time. Started in 1890s all the way up to today. When we took the project, we were asked to repair all these houses because they're old enough to be significant architecturally, and then we can restore this one. There's some actually other restored parts and here there, and then we were there were some foundations there. We were able to build some new ones. So this is where the project is, and Yangtze River, and this is our project. It's on the riverbank. The view you get to see. So we, as far as the site, we try to keep as much as possible the stepping stones and the foundations and all these bricks in good conditions that we didn't touch them. Of course, we added trees, and so it's basically new buildings on your right and older buildings on your left. And then you go up and you see ram earth construction on your left, and then there's a renovated building again, just facing you, so you can look back to the city, still in these very narrow urban spaces, which are very difficult to find in new Chinese cities. And then roof became something that we thought we could use to really develop a more systematic idea about this project. Let me show you this drawing. So what do we discover? Because during the course of 120 years or so, although wood was a primary material, but they were already used in different way. And for instance, here for this building, they were trusses. It's not the traditional Chinese stacked construction, but rather it's a triangular trusses. So they're kind of a modern. And so we thought maybe that's a hint for us to do something. So not only we restored all these old structures which deserve repair and so on, and then we developed a new laminated timber truss for the renovated buildings, and then we also use the steel frame for some. So here altogether we have 10 different sections. You see the restored structure. This is probably is more traditional. It's dovetail, and these already they look like trusses. This is the steel one, and this is the laminated timber trusses. So restoration, and then you see the new trusses in the back, and then you see the new timber laminated timber trusses. It's very important to point out one thing. The reason they were doing trusses to begin with was the fact that they can save on the big timbers. So the small pieces would allow them to make a large span. So we kind of continue with that tradition. That's more important than repeat a form they use. So there's another version of it. And then the steel structure from the outside. when the exhibition was put in, this is for Forbidden City, for the relics they had to ship the relics from Beijing to the south during World War II. And then you see the new structure, how it's been occupied. And then this is the cafe and the bookstore. So, and then we have the other timber structure. This one, it may not look like a rainbow bridge in the past, but actually this is I think it's pronounced as lever system. Lever. So if you can see the structure, how the cantilever is done, is because these two perpendicular members. It's always like this. So this is of course a pergola and for a campus. So the wood today, it's a material actually worldwide. It's been re-examined and then almost invented in terms of its quality as well as the way to engage it. So this project, of course, is directly take something from the tradition, but the result probably doesn't look as the traditional one much. And so big cantilevers, of course. So where we are with the titanics we have been working on. We do use other materials, but we are pushing wood. So this is a small museum for egg because the client is a Singaporean agricultural corporation. So we use glue them and bend them. You know, for American architects, is a very familiar technology. So this is the construction side. So we'll see how this goes. And we are also looking into a cross-laminated timber, but we haven't had opportunities to really realize anything yet. So timber and to earth. This is another project using rammed earth as the outer walls. And this is where you enter the house. And then so the inside is, again, is timber. And then, of course, one form of earth as material is brick. And this is a little kiosk. We use bricks as formwork to pour concrete. So we were able to make these big cantilevers. Just give you some idea of the technology. And then if you see the motor joints, some are very wide and some are narrow. It depends on the number of rebars we had to put in. So there's nothing magical. It's all rather rational. And so from that project, the little kiosk was outside this urban village. And then later on, we were given the opportunity to design the community center of the urban village. And now we are doing also a brick building. As a public building, although it's 4 stories, and we thought by putting all the circulation on the outside of the building, so the publicness is expressed, actually offers some shortcuts to certain facilities, and that's the construction site. This is in Shenzhen, in Nantou, is the name of the urban village. Anyway, so more brick. Brick is a material also, I would think it's not anything, nothing of course would last forever, but we want to stop using bricks, but it's hard. It's being hard. So we'll see. Concrete blocks, we have used some. So anyway, I'm presenting something we have done, but I also like to share with you some of the big question marks we have here. We really don't know, but we like to be just open-minded for now. So city, urbanism. I don't understand why fabric, the notion of fabric is no longer fashionable. Maybe that's not the right way of putting it. Especially periphery blocks. I think periphery blocks really makes a lot of sense to provide urban social interactions and create a decent quality of urban spaces. So I saw more and more reaction with my talk, rather reactionary. We had this commission to design the industrial park. So our desire was that maybe we could make it a little more like a city, and having not only a fabric that would have quality urban spaces, but also the right scale. The right scale turned out to be something much smaller than the Chinese block. Typical Chinese block, the smallest would be about 500 by 500 meters. Ours, after study extensively the European blocks and also the American blocks, we decided to use one, pretty much the smallest one we found in Portland, Oregon. I think that's the name of the town. The block size, we're talking about 500 by 500, right? But ours is 40 by 40 meters. So the project was later on nicknamed the mini blocks. But in my mind, after it's completed, they aren't mini, they're just right. They're just about the right size for our bodies. And then we designed all these blocks, and so it looks like this from the air. Little, that's probably again the wrong word, but there is a town square, and all the buildings are 4 stories tall. And you see the 10-meter wide streets. Some are for vehicles. And you see all the buildings would have this cantilevered covered walkway all the way around. And this is a pedestrian street, again, with the cantilevered canopies. And then here you can see there are cars, even a fewer parking spots, but also places, urban furniture for people to enjoy. And then within each building, there are at least one, if not more, courtyards. So brings people again outside. So that's a project, the one I just talked about. So basically, the experimental side of that design, it just really is about the size. So are we gonna do more 40 to 40 blocks? I don't know, but with that experience, probably we would try different sizes, depends on the project. But certainly not just gonna have those monster super blocks. Here is a project, the fabric is already there, as you can see. All we have done is to insert a particular building. we were asked to design an art museum in the western part of Hunan. And then we were given a site in the new development zone, large, flat, and sunny, and so on. The only problem I thought was that it's an isolated object. It's far away from where people live. So could we actually bring the art, bring culture to the people? So I asked the planning bureau chief of this town, which is called Jishou, standing right here on this, on this actually is a suspended bridge. Well, why don't we have the art museum, right here, so that it's a pedestrian bridge, but also it's close to where people live. And then they bought the idea. So here you see also it was already completed. Right in the center of this old town, there's a river. And then there are various bridges, and there's a long tradition of having covered bridges. So here you can see fabric, existing fabric, old fabric, now being connected, being bridged by the art museum or the cultural facility. So this is one of the covered bridges in the region. What's interesting about the covered bridges, it's not a place people would just go through. It's like an urban salon or a square, linear square. People would come here to spend time. Older people come to meet friends, kids to come here to play. It's a public space which serves the people in many ways. So we took that idea. So we designed two bridges, actually. A steel bridge is where this little town square idea is being implemented. The material is steel, because steel structure would allow the maximum amount of flood water to go through. It can, the steel structural elements could also cut the tree branches and so on, so it wouldn't clog up the river. And a concrete bridge with a museum, the painting gallery actually inside. And then these two bridges together would allow a big exhibition hall to happen on top of the steel bridge and embraces the concrete bridge on top. So that's how it looks from the river. And then this is the pedestrian level of the bridge. So as you all know, architects, from time to time, we can be rather rhetorical. we say a lot of nice things, but we probably don't have the chance to go very far. In this case, I have to say we got lucky. So we tried to go as far as we could. So we asked ourselves, what if even when someone crossing the bridge, he or she doesn't have time or has absolutely no interest of art, and then wouldn't go into our museum? So the solution is here. We put two big skylights on the belly of the museum. So when you cross the bridge, even when you don't have time to go in, and you get a glimpse of whatever is in there. So maybe eventually you'll be converted to an art lover. Maybe not, but we try. And then of course, people would start to use the bridge. There's a good one. There's more than one people taking naps, but I don't have a photo of that. And then a great hall of exhibition between the two bridges, and with the exhibition in there for the opening, work of all local young artists and the painting gallery, and with paintings from also the local masters, and as a bridge, two entrances into a bridge heads like that. And because of the elevation difference, on one side you have to take either an elevator or a staircase up. And then from the painting gallery, and then you can also walk down to the big exhibition hall. So, okay, I think there are two more projects. Okay. All right, education. So education has changed probably for the past 100 years very much. However, I think, again, there are some lessons we can take from some of the people who worked early on. One of the names is very important today still for me, is the American educator Jiang Dewey, who was a professor at Columbia University. Another name is a Chinese name is Tao Xingzhi. He was a student of Jiang Dewey anyway. So it's about how learning is life. If that's true, it's very important for architects to really design spaces somehow to support that idea. It doesn't just happen in any kind of spaces. So here we were allowed to actually encourage to contribute to the educational system of this art school. This is the China School of China Academy of Art, and Wang Shu and his team, they designed the Xiangshan office, and then we did the Liangzhu office, Liangzhu campus. So there's an emphasis of using hands, because for me, when you study art or design, it's very important you use your hands and head at the same time. So all the learning spaces should be like a studio. And then also teamwork is very much encouraged. So the studios or any spaces for study should be open. There's one more idea I'm just gonna show really quickly. So this is how much we have done, but now the whole campus are coming up. So this is the open continuous studio for the entire campus. That's before it's occupied. And then you see how many layers of this space. Hopefully it would go to the infinity. On the outside, you see gable wall, or you see these big canopies. Also encourage people to go in and out of these spaces. So basically, it's a match building of studios with dormitory towers on top. So the third idea was about how students would live where they study and work. So at night, you got an idea, you can go down to the studio to work on them anytime. During the day, you want to take a nap, you can also go up anytime, as long as the professors allow you to do so. And then the students are encouraged to engage our design. They did this study model of how they would like to use the campus. And they are using the campus, exhibition, old-fashioned classes, dining hall, and of course, under the eaves space, people relaxing, gymnasium, and the outdoor courtyard spaces, and so on. And then, so we were designing a smart outfit for the students. So I don't have time, I'm gonna skip it. This is what we imagine when faculty and students would all dressed up properly. this is when we haven't gave up on the idea at all. Just don't have time to really develop this project. The last project is that for me is not only about big university, but a small kindergarten. In this case, is for the relocated population. We should do something that socially encourage the kids, the preschool kids to intermingle, to socialize. So the whole idea is that there are 4 classrooms and they can be all open. The whole floor becomes one big playground. And this is these 2 projects, both our school and this one, they are super low budget. It's very easy to tell if you see a FCJZ project, you use Penn on the surface. That's a cheap project because I really don't like to use Penn that much. But so that's from the outside. And then that's inside of the classroom when it opens, is part of this common, again, public space. All the students and the teachers can share. Okay, the ending is important, so I'm gonna cut to the chase, right? As we say. Anyway, that's okay. To sum up, what do we do with inheritance? I think one thing is that you have to be truly interested in it. So like a piece of pastry, if you don't like the taste of it, there's nothing to say. You have to like the taste, like how much I love the Napoleon. And then don't be afraid to point out the inheritance might be flawed. So for Napoleon, there are 2 problems. One is that the moisture in the cream would get into the pastry. So very soon the pastry, the Napoleon would not taste as good. Another thing is that you can't cut this kind of a cake. It just fall apart. So you have to have these individual pieces. So it's kind of a anti-party cake. It doesn't make sense, right? Party is about sharing. So we're architects, right? How do we know about pastry making? No, nothing. But we know architecture. So we have to solve these 2 problems. So we use chocolate to make a swimming pool. So waterproof the cream. The cream is in the middle. So that the moisture has no way to get into the pastry. And then we put the pastry pieces on the side to keep them crispy. So you can take a piece, dip it into the cream, and then the whole party can enjoy them. And then we did a proper drawings, initially in Chinese, of course, in a use instruction and so on. So I think the way we treat our inheritance is very much like that. In this case, we will very much respect the traditional taste of Mia FAIA or Napoleon. And then we improve upon the way we're eating it, just only a little bit. Thank you very much.